In this video, we cover section 2.4 solve quadratic equation part 2. As I mentioned in section 2.3, we can solve quadratic equations in different methods. Here you see 4 different methods, factoring that already we covered in section 2.3, and completing the square method, quadratic formula method, and graphing that we will cover it in this section. As I mentioned, one of the methods to solve a quadratic equation is completing the square. Here, using your notebook, we have 5 steps to solve a quadratic equation. Use completing the square. In step 1 mentioned that the coefficient of x squared must be 1. 2, we need to isolate all those terms that they have variable in one side of equation and constant in the other side of equation. Then on the left side, we complete the square using those information that we learned from previous sections, and then we solve that equation. I'm gonna solve an equation and show you all those steps. Let's solve this example by completing the square. Step 1, we mentioned that coefficient of x squared must be 1. If the coefficient of x squared is not 1, you need to divide all terms by coefficient of x squared and make this coefficient 1. Now, step 2, we have 2 terms that have x. X means variable. So we keep these 2 terms on the left side and we move the constant to the other side. So I subtract 15. And I have x squared plus 8x equals negative 15. Now, on the left side, x squared plus 8x, we make this one as a complete square. How? If you remember, coefficient of x is 8. We divide 8 by 2 is 4. We square this 4 is 16. Now we add 16 to both sides of this equation. So I have x squared plus 8x plus 16 equals negative 15 plus 16. Now on the left side, if you remember, we had a plus b squared equals a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. Now, if you pay attention to the left side, here x squared is a squared, 16 is b squared, 2ab is 8x. A squared is x squared, so a is x. So if I write as the left side of this equation, this is x as a, b here, b squared is 16. So b means the square root of 16. The square root of 16 is 4. Now 8x is 2ab. Look at here. 2 times x times 4 is 8x. Because 8x is positive, so I have plus here a square. So look, this is right side of this equation, and this is left side of this equation. Now on the right side, I have negative 15 plus 16. Now, we have a complete square on the left side and on the right side 1. If you remember in section before, we said how we can solve this kind of equations. Take square root from both sides. So square root of x plus 4 squared is x plus 4 equals positive and negative square root of 1 is square root of 1 or 1. Now I have two equations here. X plus 4 equals 1 and x plus 4 equals negative 1. I need to solve these two equations to find solutions. So the first one, subtract 4 from both sides. X equals negative 3, one solution, and subtract 4 from both sides. X equals negative 5, the second solution. So we solve this equation by completing the square. Again, with the first step, we make sure coefficient of x squared is 1. Step 2, we keep those terms that they have variable in one side. I keep them on the left side and move the constant to the other side. Then on the left side, we try to complete the square. How? Divide coefficient of x by 2 and square the answer. Add that number to both sides of this equation. Then on the left side, using the formula, x squared plus 8x plus 16 is the same as x plus 4 squared. On the right side, negative 15 plus 16 is 1. Now we take a square root from both sides of this equation. We have x plus 4 equals positive negative 1. That means we have two simple linear equations. Solving those two, I will have two solutions of this equation. Another method to solve quadratic equations is using quadratic formula. If our equation in a standard form is in form of ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0, we can find solutions using this formula. I suggest memorize this formula because you can solve any quadratic equation using this formula. I'm going to solve an example. Let's solve this quadratic equation using quadratic formula. First step, you need to make sure all terms are on one side of equation. You see all three terms, we have it on the left side of this equation. Now you need to find what is A, what is B, what is C, these three constants. A means coefficient of x squared is 2, B coefficient of x is negative 3, and C constant is 1. Now we copy the formula. X equals minus B plus minus square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Again, I suggest memorize this formula. Now, if I substitute, b is negative 3, so minus b means minus negative 3. Plus minus here means we have two answers. Now, square root of b means negative 3 squared minus 4 times a times c. C here is 1. Divide by 2 times a. Now, negative 3 squared means 9. 4 times 2 times 1 is 8. So here we have negative times negative 3, positive 3, plus minus square root of 9 minus 8 is 1 over 2 times 2, 4. Now, we know square root of 1 is 1. So, x is equals to 3 plus minus 1 over 4. Now, we mentioned that positive negative means two solutions. So, one of them is 3 plus 1 over 4. The other solution is 3 minus 1 over 4. 3 plus 1 is 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. So that means one of the solutions is 1. 3 minus 1 is 2. 2 divided by 4. If you simplify, is 1 over 2. So the second solution is 1 over 2. We solve this equation using quadratic formula. Another method to solve a quadratic equation is solved by graphing. You see here, says the real solutions of a quadratic equation are the x-intercepts of equation, that we call them zeros or roots as well. Graph of a quadratic equation or quadratic function is a parabola. So here in these examples you see we have parabolas. Part A, the parabola in 2 points intersects x-axis. We call these two -1 and 2 x-intercepts. But at the same time, we call them zeros or roots. So to solve a quadratic equation, if you have the graph of function, you just need to go and find x-intercepts. Here, -1 and 2. Those two, -1 and 2, are solutions of equation. Look at the graph in part B and D. You see this graph in part B doesn't intersect x-axis, doesn't touch x-axis. In this form we say quadratic equation doesn't have any real solution, doesn't have any zero or root. Part D as well, you see here, our graph doesn't touch x-axis. So means there is no real solution, or we don't have zero or root. In part C, you see graph touches x-axis in 1 point. Means we have only one x-intercept, only one zero, only one solution. X equals to -3. Now, by end of this section, you know how to solve a quadratic equation by factoring, quadratic formula, by graph, or by completing the square.